the stance of Switzerland would be always neutral, because it's not going to be a US against China. It would be two blocks. I'm against external intervention. I think we should just respect each country's choices. Western world wants to export Western liberal democracy, and I think it's very wrong. Western liberal democracy are not universal values.
I would be honored, honestly, to even personally be involved as one of the members of the mediating team, because I think it's also, again, not just about mediating between problems, but between understanding of different cultures and mentalities. Why should everybody intervene somewhere else before you don't have your own problems under control? I'm speaking to you as a former Swiss Army officer. No way we would ever join the NATO. Never.
We are not for taking sides. I love China, yes, but I don't have a blind love for China. We are for peace.
Grüezi miteinander and bonjour à tous, it's Keybros. Welcome back to part 2 of our third episode of Soft Talk. Just before we start, please let me remind you that we are talking to 2 guests from Switzerland. They're Angelo and Roderick. Please also remember to subscribe to our channel by pressing the red button below, like the video by giving a thumbs up, and also share the video with your friends and family members. So we'll now be discussing the meaning and also future of Switzerland's neutrality in an ever-changing world. I'll start with the first question now. So there are concerns of a Cold War and perhaps even military conflict between the US and China lately. Switzerland is renowned for being neutral. It was neutral in World War II, even when surrounded by Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. So would Switzerland remain neutral if there's a conflict between both sides? And also, do you think Switzerland is a good mediator which both sides can trust?
Yes, absolutely. I think it would be unbelievable that Switzerland would join NATO. I think it's something really impossible. The stance of Switzerland would be always neutral. If you look at history, I think that this neutral position was very useful in terms of negotiation. If you look at the Iran issue, the only way that the US had the possibility to interact with Iran was through the Swiss embassy, and it's the same whenever the US wants to talk to North Korea. So I think if there was any Cold War or even a hot war between the US and China, Switzerland's position as a neutral country could bridge the two countries. Or I would say the two blocks, because it's not going to be a US against China. It would be two blocks, and probably we could imagine Russia joining China bloc, I think.
I definitely think that we will remain neutral. And honestly, if our good services, as we call them, to help both blocks, Angelo defined this very well, I think it will be about two blocks. If we can be the mediator, this is something we're really good in. I would be honored, honestly, to even personally be involved as one of the members of the mediating team, because I think it's also, again, not just about mediating between problems, but between understanding of different cultures and mentalities. I am now, since 38, almost 40 years traveling to Asia. I love Asia. I practice martial arts. Angelo practices yoga. We are really close to the Asian culture. And me, with my family, also, I have very strong ties to America. But I always try to remain neutral and make both sides understand about the positive and negative sides and aspects of the different cultures. One thing is sure, we as Switzerland have a very strong tradition of humanity. We have a humanitarian responsibility. This is the country where the Swiss Red Cross was founded. So we stick to human rights. And this is also something that is always a little bit strange, because everybody here believes that China doesn't respect the human rights. It's not true. It's just the way it's reported by the media. I feel always safer, personally, to not be attacked at 2 o'clock in the morning when I walk alone in the streets in Shanghai, in Chongqing, Beijing. I went to have good time just because I couldn't sleep. At 1 o'clock in Beijing in the morning, nothing happened to me. This is not possible in my hometown just next door. Certain areas of this city you must avoid. We're talking Switzerland. So I think this is a very important tradition we have, the humanitarian tradition to fight for the wounded in the field, to help in war or in zones where some natural catastrophes happen. This is very dear to us. The Swiss are famous for this. Geneva is the birthplace of the Swiss Red Cross. We help. I would be really glad if we could stay neutral, and I trust my government that at the end they will understand that they have to remain neutral. Because this is the power we have here in Switzerland. If we take party, Swiss people will not accept that our government takes a part. They have to stay neutral.
Since you talked about human rights and democracy, do you think it is right for a country to intervene into other countries on these two issues?
Absolutely not. I'm against external intervention. I think we should just respect each country's choices. There's something which is really important, that the Western liberal democracy are not universal values. Western world wants to export Western liberal democracy, and I think it's very wrong. There's a lot of misunderstanding. They tend to portray China as being a dictatorship. I think it's disgusting propaganda. It's not like this. I really wish that the Western world could learn from China the way China is operating. You need to keep in mind that there's 95% of the Chinese population that is supporting the CPC. And I think there's no better legitimacy than the support from the population. When you compare with the US, there's probably 30 to 35% versus 95% in China. In China, it's a system of what we call meritocracy, which is a system of selection and election. If you compare with the Congress in the US, it's clearly the elites that are transferring the power from generation to generation. And it's what we call the government of the 1%, for the 1%, and by the 1%. In China, it's the whole people that are represented in the Congress. But there's something which is really important. China doesn't want to export its model. It's working very well. It has delivered prosperity to Chinese. So when you look at Chinese history, where it comes from and where it is now, I think it's a huge achievement. The problem that the West has at the moment is that it feels very embarrassed. It's very embarrassing when you look at China, you're blaming China on human rights, etc. They don't have democracy. And in reality, China has delivered. When you lift up 600 million people out of poverty in 30 years, this is an achievement in human rights. The West should look first at its own models and problems. It's laughable when you look at the US. They have so many problems of inequality and human rights in the US. The US is a fascist police prison state with 2.5 million people in the prison. We are talking about 22% of the incarcerated population in the US. I respect, and I don't want to interfere with their affairs, but they should not point the finger of China, while China has done amazing achievements. I really wish personally that we live in a multipolar world and not hegemonic world ruled by the US, because what the direction the world is going is towards a fascist world.
When you think about nearly a quarter of the worldwide imprisoned people are imprisoned in the United States. When you see for what reasons they are incarcerated, some people, they're just incarcerated for their lifetime because it's the third time they got caught. They caught maybe a sandwich because they didn't have enough food stamps to buy food. This is just crazy. Why should everybody intervene somewhere else before you don't have your own problems under control? There used to be the famous quote from a mayor in New York who said, you know how we clean up our pedestrian walkways? We clean them up in 30 seconds. Why? Because everybody's cleaning up his own place. If everybody cares about his own problems, the world would be a much better world. I would say intervene, yes, if asked. If not asked, no. If you ask me if we can come and explain how our system works and eventually want to try to pick elements and adapt them to your system, it's called evolution, it's innovation, fine, yes. But that's not intervention. It's an invitation to come and share and tell me how you do it there, so that eventually we will want to try to adapt some of what you do because you are successful. 600 million people have been pulled out of poverty, and this is a huge human right success. And when we put it into other figures, it's 50% of the whole world poverty improvement goes as a credit to China. And it's an achievement based on culture, on education. I have never seen some aggression there, none. I think we should only intervene when we are being asked and only as a mediator. But we should never go to tell other people how they should run their lives when they have different cultures, different mentalities. COVID just has shown us what protectionism and isolationism would lead to. Look what happened to the economies around the world since we all had to lock down. There is no more global exchange. Shipments are stuck in other airports at the other end of the world. Economies have collapsed. We need globalization, but globalization doesn't mean that we must run this world in a hegemonic way, everywhere the same way. I know people who live in different cultures who are extremely happy with their culture and mentality. They don't need to have what we define as the best system, our democracy. It's the best system where we live, but not necessarily in other places in this world. I've been in Sri Lanka, Turkey, Arabic and African countries. Where I have not been is yet South America, but I have traveled in Asia very broadly. I see many, many lucky, happy people. Give me a break. These people live there, and especially China, for 4,000 years now, a culture that is successful, that is peaceful, that is non-aggressive. Why should we intervene? I don't think we should.
So now we'll turn to Switzerland's relations with EU and NATO. Just a bit of historical context, Switzerland is not a member state of the EU. It retains its own currency, which is the Swiss franc. They're not in the Eurozone. However, they're also part of the EFTA and also Schengen area. In terms of NATO, Switzerland is one of the very few European countries that is not a NATO member state as well, based on a policy of military neutrality. The others being like Ireland, Austria, Sweden, Finland, Serbia, etc. So do you think Switzerland will go into further European integration, or will it stay as it is now in the future, not being part of NATO, not part of the Euro, and not part of the EU?
I think absolutely there's no chance that Switzerland would ever join the EU. There's a referendum asking the people, do you want to join the EU? In 2001, there was probably around 53-54% saying no. If they were to vote now, it would be much stronger against joining the EU. The reason is that we cherish our sovereignty. By joining the EU, there's a huge loss of sovereignty. The EU is not very democratic in the sense that no universal suffrage, and the system is very opaque. So the lobbies have a lot of control. The Swiss, they cherish too much that direct democracy for joining the EU. And if you look at the trend in the EU, it's not very positive right now. If you look at the result of the last 30 years in Europe, they're very negative, especially for the southern countries, because European currency, the value is way too high for them. And I think it has benefited mainly Germany, but not the rest of Europe. So there's not a chance that Switzerland would ever join the EU.
How about NATO?
Even less. Believe me, if they were to do a petition, you need enough people signing in order to have a referendum. They wouldn't even gather enough signatures. If there was such a case of referendum, people would just go into the streets. They would oppose because this is the red line. NATO would be just a big no, because it would mean having an army joining the other armies. I think there's a huge difference between signing a petition in the UN against China, and it's another thing to join NATO.
Definitely the stance of the Swiss population is against the EU. The Swiss have made a very clear stand in the vote. And NATO is definitely not an option at all. Even if we have sometimes some military exercises with NATO forces, we don't do it because we want to join the NATO. It's just that our Air Force has a too limited space of flying. It's not so small like Hong Kong, but it's still small with ultrasonic jets. So we have to go sometimes outside of Switzerland for maneuvers. We're surrounded by NATO states. But no, we will remain neutral. That's definitely clear. Simon Kuchner once said, we will see a segregation in Europe between North and South. United Europe, it's not so united as would like to appear. Fact is, there are southern European countries who are nearly third world countries today, economically speaking. They're underperforming. They're suffering a lot. Yes, the winners are Germany, some Scandinavian countries like Denmark, and also Dutch and France. We will see a split between economically performing European countries and some who will become third world countries. And I would even say France is at the risk to join a third world country status in the next 2 decades. That's how poor some regions in Europe now perform. It's not a healthy system they have in the European Union. And we will never want to join this, definitely not. And for sure not the NATO. I'm speaking to you as a former Swiss Army officer. No way we would ever join the NATO. Never.
Last question. So with the world being very polarized nowadays on many fronts, how do you see Switzerland's future?
I think Switzerland will stay always a safe haven. If you look at the position of Switzerland during the First World War and the Second World War, it was a refuge and benefited actually from the instability outside because it's a financial center. It needs to prepare for reconstruction if we go into a hot war. If you look at the real war behind the tensions between the US and China, it's mainly related to the dollar. We are in a trend of de-dollarization. So the big fear of the US is that China and Russia would gradually drop the dollar. If you look at Iraq, Venezuela, the US hit on those countries mainly because they wanted to drop the dollar. One of the cases was Gaddafi. He wanted to create a golden-backed currency for all Africa, and because of that, he just got killed. So what might happen, the next step, I would say, would be related to the dollar, and the exchanges are going to be increasingly out of the dollar and using the euro. And this could be the downfall of the US. And I think one of the problems that Switzerland could have is that it would further accelerate the increase of value of the Swiss franc. That's one of the worries that we have here. Is you need to expect a downfall of the American economy and also the US dollar. Where the people would put their money is going to be gold, Swiss franc, and cryptocurrency. The whole world might suffer if there's a clash between China and the US, but I would be quite positive on Switzerland. I just hope everything is going to be okay. Every single country will be rational, that we don't go into a Cold War. That's my wish. But when you have Trump and even Biden, I'm not very positive. It's not looking really good next 5 to 10 years, because mainly the US will not want to relinquish its first hegemonic position. So we are into what we call the Thucydides trap, which is whenever you have a superpower that is being surpassed by another power, it's going to create clashes where emerging Germany, Imperial Japan, and the latest was Russia. So now I think they are going to fight against someone who's, say, a master in chess. China is much, much wiser than Japan, Russia, and Germany. I just hope for the best. And I think what we are doing here with Roderick and all my friends, we are not for taking sides. We are for peace. I love China, yes, but I don't have a blind love for China. I just want peace. And I think I'm doing this for the next generation because we need to avoid a clash and war. We don't want that.
Mr. Xi Jinping, with One Belt, One Road, launched a very good opportunity for many economies. And I know we are at the end of the road. I'm glad to know that, because the road doesn't go over the Atlantic to America. And yes, we're for peace. I think Switzerland is already participating on One Belt, One Road. Really happy about it. I don't see dark clouds, of course. There are some storms like we're now just experiencing with coronavirus over the whole world. Storms comes and go. The opportunities for the world countries participating to One Belt, One Road are fantastic for the next decades to come. And we're part of it for sure. We will be smart enough to do our best to position Switzerland very well in this. I'm always proud when I go and see the people in Beijing, government that I have some contacts with. I feel how much they love Switzerland and like us, and they know we're trustworthy partners. We are standing to our word. We're famous for this. I encounter also these people in China, and so I think we have a lot of shared values. The world will not be increasingly polarized. When you look at the abundant possibilities that have arisen now, thanks to the technology that has evolved over time. We're just having this Zoom conference here now. You're in Hong Kong, Angela is in Bubble, I'm here. This world has become a village. We're all growing closer together. This world is abundant of possibilities for those who embrace it with a spirit of peace, love, and not of hatred and aggression and hegemonical behaviors like the Americans show. The Americans behave like this because they know they're disappearing and becoming unimportant. And instead of behaving smart and say, okay, how can we continue to remain some good valuable partners, no longer number one, still number two. That's okay. The world doesn't need to be polarized between two blocks. And I am happy to read that hundreds of millions of people today who 5 years ago didn't have this. And with this, they participate to the World Wide Web. They can make the business out of nothing. And 15 years ago, there were no smartphones. We tend to forget that. The majority of the people in this world want that their kids have a better life than they had, better opportunities, better career possibilities. That's what all parents do. Russians, Americans, Chinese, South Americans, doesn't matter. And that's just normal. It's human. And that's the beauty of life. With so much beautiful love, some Chinese take care of their kids and teach them to safeguard and transfer knowledge from one generation to the other. I have no worries that with China, the world will be a better place. With this America that I see today, the world cannot be a better place. Definitely not.
Thank you very much for your time. It's really a great pleasure to have both of you onto our show. So please take care and see you in the next episode. All right, au revoir and cheers.
Keybros.
Au revoir. Thank you.